Hi, I'm Beau Mahurin, the co-writer and composer of H. Holmes the Musical, inviting you to discover the devil inside. So after the last extended first look into the sounds, the concept, the direction the show's going, I'm sure you're wondering what the progress update is going to be like. First, a few basic general notes that are very exciting, at least from my personal perspective. We do have our second reading. So basically it's a incomplete, not staged, just people sitting down in character reading through of the show coming up on Saturday, March 5th. It's being hosted by the Moonlight Players of Claremont, Florida. The Moonlight Players are a small community nonprofit theater organization. They have been kind enough to offer their space for this, and there's also a lot of regional folks. For those who don't know, that we are based in Central Florida area, but it's now expanding outside the region. Not just local venues are interested. We have had already people attached to places up in Pennsylvania. We've had a gentleman from theater board out in Kansas City. So yes, this is getting noticed, and it's both somewhere between exciting and, let's be honest, a little intimidating. It's like we're so happy to see this, and of course for me, my brain's sort of going, I've got to get this done! I'm sure you'd probably be in the same boat too. And speaking of positive directions, when it comes to the music, there is basically now, for lack of a better term, a sound palette. So basically a collection of themes and motifs and sort of here's highs, lows, troughs to create Act 1. Act 2, there are a couple songs that are already getting worked on, but Act 2 is this is one of those shows where Act 2 is really dependent upon where Act 1 is coming from. Those are the biggest things right now. There is one major topic, which is really the focus of this particular installment, and I'm going to bring that up next, and that has to do with lyric building. So before I explain the process of how that's going with this particular show, I want to share some insight and some very, very relevant quotations from some very well-established professionals in this field. So if anyone out there is a writer in your own right, or has worked in musical theater of any form long enough, you know that one of the most dreaded but one of the most guaranteed questions from any interview process is always going to be, which came first, the music or the lyrics? And let me tell you, from this side of the fence, that gets to be a very hairy question. It really does. My favorite answer to that question, the music lyrics one, comes from, of all places, the Candor and Ebb musical Curtains, the book of which was written by Rupert Holmes, the same author as The Mystery of Edwin Drood, the musical, of course. Same answer as the chicken or the egg. It can start with a note, which can become a phrase, and then you try hanging words off each branch, like trimming a tree. And it really is like that in many ways. There is no one starts the other, although they can catapult each other into formation. And that's actually a good point to mention before we go too far too. For those of you who know musical theater, you know there is not one cut and dried formula to creating a musical. Sometimes they are just plays with song. Sometimes they are the songs define the story, or vice versa. We're actually aiming for a story with music, to borrow from a generic quote. But it is really a story with music, and I'm going to let you in on a secret right now. Act 2, we've pretty much already established, only has 2 buttons. 2 places where the music goes, ta-da, you can clap now. The reason why is because we want the audience to feel sort of lost, a little overwhelmed, because Act 2 is where things really get messy. That goes into a whole nother discussion. To get back to the topic at hand, right now, because there is a sound palette to play with, the real frustration, the real heavy lifting is going into lyric writing right now. To give you a picture of why this is such a big deal, you're probably thinking, it's more words, this should be easy, right? No. there are some basic principles that are established in musical theater, both traditional and modern, that are sort of the unspoken taboos, or the encouragement, or you should not use this kind of vocabulary for this purpose. There's even a schematic to creating rhymes, and you want it to be as both precise, but at the same time as honest as possible. And I got a couple of really good quotations. The first one comes from Tom Jones. Tom Jones, by the way, the lyricist and writer, not the pop star. Tom Jones is part of the Schmidt and Jones team who created, amongst other shows, The Fantastics, I Do, Celebration, and Philemon. And Tom Jones published a book in 1998 called Making Musicals, which is basically an introduction to both his story and also the general art of creating a musical. And he quotes, "The real art and the real craft of lyric writing lies in the act of compression. To get an emotion or an idea or a revelation and squeeze it down into its most compact and graspable and memorable possible form. That is the challenge and the joy of lyric writing. Every word, every juxtaposition of words is of extreme importance. Every and every but and the is weighed with extreme care. Every word, every phrase is repeated over and over again in the mouth, in the ear, to see if it works, to see if it sounds right, to see if the best word or phrase you can possibly get. This can be hard, very hard, especially if you want the end result to sound simple and unpremeditated." And that's actually a very good point to make too. To borrow a line from one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Futurama, when you do things right, it will seem as though you've done nothing at all. There's a lot of sweat and a lot of agonizing just choosing the right words to match a rhythm, to match a character, to match a moment. In fact, it makes me doubly happy to hear from all people. This is a quote taken from another book called The Art of the American Musical, which is a compendium of interviews with like the biggest names in musical theater composition of the last 50 years. Ahrens and Flaherty, Stephen Schwartz, Kander and Ebb. But of course, I'm going to be quoting Sondheim because he is worth noting. It made my heart so happy to see lyrics have always been very, very difficult for me to write. And this is an interview from 2004. But to focus on what we're talking about, the lyrics themselves, and for those of you who are younger generation, I say younger, I'm getting towards that middle-aged category, I won't say I am, but I'm getting towards. There's been a lot of change in the sound, the look, and the feel of the musical theater world, especially in the last 10, 20 years. And so I want to pull this out. These are Stephen Sondheim's words, so if you want to quote me, quote him, not me. I'll put his name just to let you know that I'm quoting him. "Pop music has deafened the ear to lyrics. But in the last 100 years, there really haven't been many great lyricists. Also, the leading lyricists in the first half of the century didn't have to write to tell a story. They were never tested in that way. And my guess is that if they had been, they wouldn't have been very good at it. They didn't have to do anything but entertain. Nowadays, to be a good lyricist, you not only have to be good technically, but you also have to have a sense of drama, and you have to apply that. Now storytelling is what it's about. Apart from proficiency and experience, you have to have characters that are worth writing about. And that is a major key, and especially when it comes to shows like Holmes. This is a character-drive show. We've already talked about Holmes himself and what an important arc he goes through dramatically and musically. I'll save the details for another discussion, but our real main character is not him. I'm going to compare, just for a moment, Jesus Christ Superstar, Andrew Lloyd Webber. Jesus might be the title character, but it's Judas who is the show. In our version, our Judas, the one who really makes the show, is Detective Frank Geyer. Now, if you don't know who that is, I'll put his name up. Detective Frank Geyer was the Philadelphia-based policeman who eventually brought Holmes to justice. He spent a lot of time on the road locating this man. So he is not only our linchpin in terms of the story, he's sort of the omnipresent figure. And that gets into, again, a whole other talk. I keep saying that a lot, don't I? Well, that means there's more time to talk about this stuff later, right? But getting back to the lyric concept, this also ties into one thing that even Derek, my writing partner, Derek Wallman, pointed out several times recently, and which I'm very grateful for. Hi, Derek. He basically says part of the reason why, because he has seen other main stage, full-length musicals that I have put together, he says part of the reason why I think I'm doing so well with this is because it's taken me out of the comfort zone. And Derek, this one's for you, bud, because again, going back to Sondheim here, I think you should frighten yourself. You should try to wade into territory you haven't waded into before. That doesn't necessarily have to be new musical territory. It can be a new approach to the show or to the way of telling a story. I know I'm quoting a lot here, but believe me, this is a lot of how my brain works. And I found these kind of interviews years after I had established these kinds of mentalities, so it makes me happy to know I'm not alone. My approach, Sondheim, my approach is closest to that of an actor. I inhabit the character the way I think an actor does. Often by the time we're through, I know the script better than the author does, because like an actor, I examine every line and every word. I query my collaborator on exactly what he means, and we discuss it thoroughly. I think musical characterization is something that is rare in the theater. One of the reasons is that characters worth musicalizing are rare in the theater. Rich characters in books from musicals are few and far between, and that is an absolute truth. So now that you've gotten sort of a picture of the sort of shared mentalities of both the pre-established professionals and the upcoming ones, I want to share a couple of our finished lyric products. You know, the songs may not be done yet, but I've got some definite, here's where we're going. So I'm going to let you sort of hear a couple samples, not musically, just lyrically. You ready? Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a few examples of some sets of lyrics that are maybe not the complete song yet, but are definitely established into where the songs are going. The lyrics themselves don't always have to be purely out of midair. And in fact, there's usually a strong reason behind why those particular words, that particular rhythm has been established. Personally, I always try to keep my lyrics so that it's almost like a speech pattern, and from there, we can turn it into a true musical verse. For example, at the end of the show, and we're going to go backwards here, I won't say who, but I will say that 3 of our characters turn out to be survivors. They are not knocked off by our serial killer. The song starts with MYRTA. I mentioned her last time. MYRTA BELKNAP is one of his wives, and the one that we choose to focus on in this particular retelling. And so when she walks out after he's let off from the courtroom, her first response lyrically is, "Henry, it's MYRTA, the mother of your daughter. Remember me? I'm still here, living in Chicago, looking after Lucy, wondering what happened. All the while waiting for a word, for a signal, for a sign from what could have been the love of my life. Now I'm just that murderer's wife, and there's nothing left of me. I'm a victim all my own, and it seems I'm not alone." And that's very sort of an open poem form. There's very little rhyming until the end, and so it creates an almost sort of broken kind of feeling. The song itself, the music, is one of the very few songs in the show that becomes a ballad. There's only like 2 true ballads in the whole thing. On a completely different note, when Holmes first arrives, most of his story, at least the big part that a lot of people like to focus on, and we are focusing on too, takes place in a suburb community of Chicago. It's called Englewood. Nowadays, it's a very different place than from where Holmes was back in those days. Basically, in the 1880s, it was right after the Great Fire of Chicago, so a lot of people were fleeing the city. Chicago was the second biggest city in the nation after New York at that time. So a lot of people wanted to get away from the smell of the stockyards, from the inner city filth and crime and poverty. We wanted to create that sort of almost suburbia atmosphere. The only difference is this is 1886. So it's not exactly, you know, Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy suburbs. This is late Victorian suburbs. It's a ragtime. It is an upbeat song. We are purposely trying to create that lyrical setting of that sort of ice cream social pastels, sepia tones, what you would think of as a late 19th century golden age kind of feel. And the first thing started, I'm just going to give you 1/2 verse from it. It's almost a limerick in the way that it's rhymed, but you can sort of hear the ragtime syncopation already in it. 6 miles south of the city of Chicago, a budding young community thrives, in sleek gentility and sweet tranquility, in neatly well-ordered lives. And that's pretty much what the whole song is about. Halfway through, Holmes comes in, hopping off the train, and he offers his sort of first take on it to the same sound, to the same rhythm, but of course from his own personal perspective. Finally, for now, the opening I Want song, for those of you who don't know that term, if you look at any good musical, and it doesn't always have to be about the person singing, it just establishes here's the drive, the motive, here's where we're heading with this story because of the desires of a particular character. His I Want song is called In My Hands. I played a piece of it last time on the long video. I'm just going to give you, again, a couple verses to give you a picture of what it's like. He explains about as a child when the kids would pick on him, there was one day where he was shoved into the doctor's office and basically forced to come face to face with the hanging skeleton, which of course at that time was a real human skeleton. And for a kid, even today, that can be a little And so to finish that bridge, his comments were, "For faced with a grisly reminder of mankind's ultimate end, I suddenly realized then and there, locked in the gaze of a death's head stare, that I had a say in the when and where, and my fears became my friend. I had a chance to change my fate. I had a chance to choose. So with nothing left to lose, I chose life, and I took life," which can be taken in very many different ways. Holmes, I purposely am trying to create lyrically to be very almost poetic. And the reason being, this is an analytical mind. This is someone who is on the surface put together but is constantly racing. So we want to have that complex, analytical, overly rational, overly academic kind of sounds to him. The same song, the end of the song, "From that first macabre obsession comes the path I now pursue, to make life my profession, and to take life from it too. And I will not halt my progression over the likes of you," the you being someone who's trying to get in his way. "So how dare you call me heartless? You know nothing of my being. How can you understand me when you don't know what you're seeing? I will not let you judge me. I rebuke your reprimands." And I'm not going to tell you how the song ends. But it's very much a self-empowerment with more than a touch of that smug, I'm better than you personality at the base of it. So it's somewhere between I'm rooting for you, man, and you're a little intimidating. And I can't tell you how much time just going into just those handful of verses really took. It's going to be a busy process. The good news is the spark is there and we're moving forward. I do want to shout out one last time to my co-writer Derek. One of the best compliments he ever offered recently, because I've been sharing this musical palette as it builds, is he basically says, "I'm waiting for the day where I don't like what I hear." And I hope it continues that way. Right, Derek? So for now, there's your introspection, not only into the craft of lyric writing, but where we are in terms of progression, where we're going, and also the personal process that goes into lyric writing too. If you'd like to learn more, don't forget that you can follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/HHHolmesmusical. You can also find the official website at www.hhholmesthemusical.com. If you have any additional questions, comments, feedback, if there's any topics you would like me to tell you more about, any particular details you're curious to learn more about, please feel free to comment below. That's what those comment blocks are for, not just for liking. Also, please don't forget to share this with friends. The more the merrier. This is a work in progress. We would love to have you on board as part of our growing community. So until next time, thank you once again for dropping in. We'll see you on the next installment of The Method to the Madness as we discover the devil inside.